something suspicious is unfolding before our very eyes, without noise, without resounding headlines. It creeps in silently, reshaping minds, dismantling moral frameworks, and replacing the measure of success, from virtue and growth to noise and spectacle on screens and platforms engineered to glorify triviality. It polishes the image of figures who offer nothing, add nothing, and say nothing, until banality itself becomes a celebrated virtue, applauded with awards and honors. Is this merely a natural deviation in the course of human development? Or is there an unseen hand steering the ship into this decline, deliberately manufacturing stupidity, marketing ignorance, and dressing vulgarity in glittering attire? Is there a calculated effort to elevate the vacuous as role models, while the wise are sidelined, the reformers excluded, and the defenders of values and principles relentlessly fought, as though the world has tacitly agreed to live in a distorted version of itself, swept away by a tide that commodifies everything? In this upside-down reality, no one asks about thought, value, or virtue. The only questions that matter are, how many followers? What is the ad rate? How far has it spread? And so, if we can understand how we arrived at this point, we may yet find a way out of the matrix, if we truly wish to escape it. There is no doubt that the scientific and intellectual advancement humanity has achieved over the past century surpass everything previously recorded in known human history, or at least, this is what most people believe. This belief largely stems from the steadily growing intelligence of humankind throughout the years. Accordingly, one might assume that humanity is headed toward a future more dazzling than even the wildest dreams of science fiction writers. While that may hold some truth, the reality, as revealed by most studies and available evidence, is that the future is unlikely to be populated by geniuses, nor will the world become the utopia many envision. In fact, if the current trajectory of human intelligence continues, our descendants may find themselves unable to solve even the simplest problems or handle the most trivial challenges. Stupidity will shroud minds, and the faculty of free thinking will vanish. Undoubtedly, the challenges confronting humanity compel us to question the very nature of intelligence itself, leading us to explore various concepts and definitions, chief among them, fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence, a term coined by American psychologist Raymond Cattell, refers to the analysis of general intelligence, also known as the G factor. It denotes the innate ability to think logically and solve problems independent of acquired knowledge, that is, reasoning rooted in instinct and logic. This form of intelligence relies on inductive reasoning, drawing conclusions about the whole based on its components. It is a kind of reasoning based on generalization, allowing for the study of entire societies through the examination of samples. Despite its limitations, statistics as a field relies heavily on this method of reasoning. In addition to inductive reasoning, fluid intelligence also involves deduction, the logical connection between premises and conclusions. It is a form of inference in which the validity of a conclusion is contingent upon the soundness of its premises. For instance, consider the following. All women are unintelligent. My daughter is a woman. Therefore, my daughter is unintelligent. This conclusion is logically valid based on the premises, but the argument remains flawed, as the first premise is inherently false. Fluid intelligence differs from crystallized intelligence, which depends on accumulated knowledge and experience. While the former is innate, the latter crystallizes through the depth and breadth of knowledge a person acquires over their lifetime. Though distinct, these two types of intelligence are closely related. Most IQ tests aim to measure both fluid and crystallized intelligence, with overall IQ being the sum of the two. Building on Cattell's research, American psychologist James R. Flynn conducted a series of global tests during the 20th century to assess both types of intelligence using sample-based methods. He standardized the average score at 100, with a standard deviation of 15 or 16 points. Flynn observed a consistent and linear increase in test scores over time, indicating a steady rise in human intelligence. Each generation appeared smarter than the last. This rise was attributed to factors such as societal stability, better education, improved nutrition, and more elements that made people more intelligent than in the past. This phenomenon became known as the Flynn effect, and it was supported by numerous studies confirming that IQ scores were increasing by about 3 points every decade. However, the Flynn effect peaked among individuals born in the mid-1970s and has since begun to decline noticeably. A study by researchers at the Ragnar Frisch Center for Economic Research in Norway highlighted this trend by analyzing IQ scores of 730,000 individuals born between 1962 and 1991. The study revealed a drop in the Flynn effect by about 7 points per generation. Flynn himself confirmed these findings through research on British teenagers, registering a similar decline, prompting him to remark, "There seems to be something troubling among British teenagers." Meanwhile, American author Kevin Anderson echoed this concern, stating, "Some studies show that individuals today are more intelligent than ever before, but many others suggest that, over recent decades, human cognitive skills have deteriorated." Despite skepticism from some researchers regarding the validity of these studies, others took the matter seriously, delving into this alarming phenomenon in an effort to confirm whether human intelligence has indeed been declining over recent decades. They also sought to identify the causes behind this regression, especially in light of the tremendous technological and intellectual advancements witnessed globally. These scholars attributed the decline to several factors, all of which revolve around technology. Ironically, the very force that was expected to elevate our intellect appears to have dulled it. The widespread availability of the internet and the overwhelming influx of random information absorbed daily have created a false sense of knowledge. As a result, individuals often believe that acquiring a snippet of information instantly qualifies them as experts, without consulting books, credible sources, or subjecting the information to the fundamentals of critical thinking. This has led to the proliferation of logical fallacies, so much so that people, in their ignorance, often accept falsehoods as truths and dismiss genuine facts as fallacies. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, foretold this era of confusion, saying, "There will come to people years of deceit, in which the liar will be believed, the truthful will be disbelieved, the treacherous will be trusted, and the trustworthy will be seen as traitors, and the Ruwaybida will speak." The ease of accessing information, coupled with the blurring of truth and falsehood, has fostered a type of veiled ignorance, paralyzing the mind's capacity for sound reasoning rooted in inquiry and comparison. It has also fueled herd mentality and blind conformity. Educational systems based on rote learning and memorization have produced individuals who wear the guise of expertise but lack true understanding, fools disguised as the educated. Furthermore, the rapid tempo of modern life, accelerated by technology and social media, has plunged humanity into a whirlpool of distraction and haste, severely diminishing our capacity for deep thought. In addition to these technological and educational factors, some researchers have traced the decline in intelligence to genetic patterns. Couples with above-average intelligence tend to have fewer children, or none at all, while those with lower cognitive abilities reproduce at a higher rate. This imbalance gradually tips the demographic scale, increasing the number of less intelligent individuals, while reducing the population of the intellectually gifted. This hypothesis formed the basis of Mike Judge's film Idiocracy. The movie imagines that in the year 2005, the U.S. military decided to cryogenically freeze its most competent soldiers for future use. The male participant, an unremarkable army librarian of average intelligence, was joined by a woman from outside the military for the same experiment. However, shortly after the project began, the supervising officer was arrested for a scandal, and the experiment was forgotten. Centuries passed, 500 years to be exact, during which the intelligent population dwindled and the unintelligent reproduced unchecked. When the two subjects finally awoke, they found themselves in a future where society had become so dull-witted that people were incapable of solving even the simplest problems, like managing waste accumulation. The protagonist, believing that humanity must have developed time travel by then, embarks on a quest to find it and escape the idiocy surrounding him. His articulate speech and cultured demeanor earn him ridicule. People consider him effeminate simply because he speaks eloquently. Art has degenerated into meaningless visuals, consumed without thought. A food corporation has even convinced the public to water crops with a sports drink, resulting, of course, in a global food crisis. When the protagonist is finally apprehended and tested for intelligence, he is discovered to be the smartest man alive, the only one capable of addressing society's problems. Yet all he wants is to find a way back. At one point, he tells his female counterpart, "Go back and tell people to read books." Eventually, he discovers that the so-called time machine is nothing more than an amusement park attraction. Resigned to his fate, he accepts life in this absurd world, now ruled by foolishness. Though comedic in tone and focused on a single cause, the film presents a sobering reflection grounded in scientific research that suggests human intelligence is in decline. This is corroborated by the Flynn effect and the aforementioned studies. Perhaps most telling of all is the evidence before our eyes, both in the real and virtual worlds, offering irrefutable proof that the number of fools is growing at an alarming rate. In his book, The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity, based on various field experiments, Italian economic historian Carlo Cipolla, a professor at the University of California, outlined 5 fundamental laws of stupidity, which can be summarized as follows. First, a stupid person causes harm to others and to themselves. Second, the stupid person is the most dangerous category of humans in society. Third, there is no correlation between stupidity and other personal traits or levels of education. Fourth, non-stupid individuals tend to underestimate the destructive power of stupid people. Fifth, people invariably underestimate the number of stupid individuals within society. Based on these 5 laws, Cipolla classified humanity into 4 distinct types. Of the intelligent, one who benefits themselves and others. Of the helpless, one who does not benefit themselves yet benefits others. Of the bandit, one who benefits themselves but not others. Of the stupid, one who neither benefits themselves nor others. Cipolla regarded the stupid person as the most dangerous of all types, more perilous even than thieves and murderers. This is because the stupid individual is impulsive, emotionally driven, and makes judgments based on appearances. They express opinions without consideration for consequences or the problems they may cause for themselves or others. They aim to destroy others without any personal gain, ultimately contributing to the collapse of society as a whole. The true peril of the stupid person lies in their obliviousness to their own stupidity. This notion recalls the classification made by renowned Arabic linguist Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi, who divided people into 4 categories. A man who knows and knows that he knows, ask him, for he is the scholar. A man who knows but does not know that he knows, remind him, for he is forgetful. A man who does not know but knows that he does not know, teach him, for he is ignorant. A man who does not know and does not know that he does not know, avoid him, for he is the fool. Thus, the defining trait of stupid people is their ignorance of their own stupidity. They are inherently destructive, inflicting material and moral damage upon both themselves and others. They are inclined toward all forms of corruption and perversely yearn to see everyone fail as they have, so they don't feel out of place or left behind. From this stems their tendency to incessantly criticize anything beneficial or constructive, to blame others, belittle others' achievements, and mock those who succeed. The stupid individual possesses a barren imagination, a narrow outlook, and limited vision. They judge solely by appearances, lacking the capacity for deep thinking or reading between the lines. This makes them blindly selective in their judgments, prone to dogmatic pursuits. They presume to discern hidden intentions and inner motives, often stereotyping and categorizing people. They are devoid of comparative reasoning or analytical skills. The stupid person is dogmatic, closed-minded, and refuses to entertain new ideas or even consider the possibility of being wrong. Paradoxically, they possess an inflated sense of confidence, while intelligent individuals are often plagued with self-doubt. The stupid person rejects logical arguments and evidence. Their beliefs are unshakable regardless of the strength of opposing proofs. They are unreceptive to criticism and unwilling to improve their reality, ideas, or shortcomings. Instead, they engage in debates merely for attention, driven by a conviction that they are the most intelligent person on earth, possessing knowledge that no one else has attained. Strikingly, in our current age, the age of artificial intelligence, so to speak, the number of such fools who voice opinions as if they were experts has exceeded all expectations. What is even more alarming is the lack of a clear link between stupidity and educational attainment, social status, or environmental background. This was one of Sapola's key findings, and one he considered particularly frightening, as it has led to an increase in the number of degree-holding fools. These are but glimpses of the traits of the foolish, traits that have been deliberately amplified by deceptive media and the rampant spread of social platforms, which have thrust such individuals into the spotlight and promoted blind imitation of ideas, beliefs, opinions, and even appearances, all in service of manufacturing ignorance and stupidity. The fool is easily led, indoctrinated, manipulated, and controlled. The danger escalates when such a person transitions from being an ordinary citizen, whose stupidity may be limited to a negative comment, a baseless opinion, or causing a minor issue, to a position of authority and decision-making. At that point, nations begin to drown in oceans of ignorance, for backwardness prevails in societies that fail to sideline the foolish and elevate the intelligent. These foolish societies glorify idiots, turning them into idols and role models, presenting them as symbols of success at the expense of the wise, who are marginalized, fought, excluded, and exiled. The intelligent, then, are drawn in, embraced, and celebrated by enlightened societies that understand such minds are the true means of salvation. Undoubtedly, modern technology has contributed, whether directly or indirectly, to the decline of human intelligence. From a calculator that weakened arithmetic skills, to computers and smartphones, and finally to artificial intelligence, which deprives the mind of the need to think or innovate and deepens dependency. Just as the body's muscles atrophied over generations of mechanical ease, so too have cognitive abilities diminished. Thus, we see some of the most advanced modern curricula turning to ancient methods to revive mental arithmetic and logical reasoning in an effort to salvage what remains. The crafting of stupidity begins with the inversion of truths, the betrayal and distortion of honesty, and the widespread endorsement of foolishness and triviality, whether on television screens or social media. Consequently, wealth became the sole measure of success, regardless of merit, and the trivial were elevated as cultural icons and heroes. We now witness football fans fighting over clubs they support, though they are barred from its gates and share none of the billions it generates for the elite. Artists have become the societal stars, dominating the public sphere at the expense of scientists. We now live in an age obsessed with fame and self-display, driven by a relentless chase after money, regardless of its source. Our world today is not far removed from that depicted in the film Idiocracy, a world brimming with fools spawned by an educational system built on rote memorization, one that suppressed free thought, creativity, and creators. The matrix of stupidity has become tightly sealed, shrinking with each passing day. There is no escape from it except through the cultivation of deep listening, contemplation, independent thinking, and a return to human virtues, before a time comes when we can no longer even recognize who we are, or when survival requires us to ride the very wave of stupidity. Yet before you consider riding that wave to succeed in life, remember the words of God Almighty. As for the scum, it vanishes like foam, but what benefits the people remains on the earth. Stupidity in our modern age has become an industry, carefully guarded and vigorously supported by the elite to forge a world devoid of free thought. Through it, they can propagate whatever ideas and beliefs they choose, preparing humanity to embrace a new world order, one stripped of true knowledge and of faith. Have you ever wondered why the world feels so trivial? Why has the media shifted from a tool of enlightenment to a vessel of mindless entertainment? And why has life become a contest in which the most superficial and ignorant are the ones who prevail? Are we truly ascending as a civilization, or are we being led into a dark abyss by unseen hands that feed us noise to rob us of awareness under the guise of, don't think too much or too little, for the less you think, the more likely you are to succeed? Well, if these questions have ever crossed your mind, it means your consciousness is still awake, aware, or at the very least, suspicious that this prevailing condition is not the product of chance, but rather the result of a diabolical endeavor that has succeeded in turning ignorance into a finely crafted system. Throughout the ages, since the dawn of history, ignorance has served as one of the most potent instruments by which ruling powers have extended their dominance, not only over impoverished or developing societies, but even over culturally and intellectually advanced peoples. And here, we are not speaking of ignorance as a natural consequence of a lack of opportunity, resources, or access to information, but rather as a deliberate, systematic project, one shaped by policies, codified by legislation, and executed through strategic tools designed to embed it gradually into the minds until it appears to be the only viable path. Meanwhile, the alternative, the pursuit of knowledge, becomes a burden that may hinder an individual's integration into society or subject them to ridicule from a culture submerged in a deep slumber. In the heart of a matrix of manufactured ignorance embedded within educational systems, media outlets, and social networks, the very definition of success is re-engineered, no longer tied to genuine achievement, but intricately linked to a form of ignorance born from the obfuscation of truth, or its replacement by a cocktail of falsehoods, superficiality, and excessive distraction. Within systems governed by an elite of corporations, institutions, and individuals, the ignorance of the masses becomes a strategic imperative. An educated, critical, and self-aware populace, one that discerns the threads of the grand game, cannot be easily led or manipulated. Conversely, a populace steeped in ignorance can be effortlessly steered, its choices directed, and even its core beliefs reshaped. Here lies the critical distinction between ignorance as a natural state and ignorance as a calculated strategy to dismantle the intellect. The former can be remedied through education and openness. The latter is a complex system where politics entwines with economics, religion with media, and education with popular culture, all aiming to dominate and redirect the collective mind. Thus, to transcend this engineered ignorance is a task as arduous as any known to humanity. This is not merely an educational dilemma. It is a grand project of stupefaction designed to keep societies entranced and dependent. A long-term blueprint devised by forces that understand domination requires no tanks or armies. So long as the collective mind remains imprisoned, its key held by those who script the rules from behind the scenes. While the mechanisms of this conspiracy are vast and varied, the question of who engineers such ignorance does not yield a vague or nebulous answer. The global elite, a web of colossal corporations, major financial institutions, and influential political and intelligence centers, possesses the wealth, media, and decision-making power, and is fully aware that the greatest threat to its interests is a conscious public. Thus, the most effective method of control lies in systematic stupefaction. Yet this elite cannot accomplish its aims without local instruments of execution. Enter the governments. While people may believe their governments represent their will and work for their benefit, in many cases, these administrations function as mere extensions of hidden hands, implementing policies of ignorance under subtle yet calculated guises. Naturally, not all governments are part of this machinery, but many are either directly subordinate or forced by economic and political pressures to comply with a broader agenda designed to manufacture ignorance. This is done by steering education toward rote learning rather than critical thinking, dependence rather than autonomy, blind obedience rather than inquiry and doubt. The tools, curricula stripped of substance, media strategies that exalt frivolity, and the glorification of vacuous individuals with neither intellectual nor moral worth. Meanwhile, true figures of knowledge and authentic thought leaders are systematically erased, especially those who engage in public enlightenment. Thus, the ground is being prepared for new generations to derive their understanding of the world from shadowy illusions crafted by those who control the strings behind the curtain. Advanced tools are now in play. Artificial intelligence, behavioral data analytics, techniques of collective consciousness manipulation, psychological media campaigns, and educational frameworks that suppress intellectual curiosity and condition the youth to become addicted to fragmented, superficial content rather than nurturing depth and critical inquiry. In short, the stupefaction of societies is neither accidental nor the result of negligence. It is a deliberate, intricate operation orchestrated by skilled minds intent on producing a populace primed for submission, stripped of depth, easily pacified, and eager to follow whatever is prescribed. For instance, ask a group of people about the shape of the earth, whether it spins as a globe or lies flat and unmoving, and you'll find that most will fiercely defend the spherical model using arguments implanted in their minds since infancy, without ever questioning or evaluating them. Worse still, they may brand anyone who challenges this belief as ignorant, despite having never subjected the idea to logical scrutiny or explored counter-evidence. This is the hallmark of a society where ignorance has preempted critical and independent thought. This process hinges on three core pillars: the media, education, and curated entertainment, all meticulously managed and professionally orchestrated to manufacture a generation with fractured consciousness, shallow reasoning, and a passive aversion to seeking truth, content to absorb whatever is offered without question. Media is no longer a neutral conveyor of events or a forum for public discourse. It has become a grand engine of mass deception, shaping public perception through carefully filtered news, biased analysis, and repetitive messaging that forges public convictions and thinks on behalf of the people. It dictates who is friend and who is foe, what constitutes success and what defines failure. It glorifies the vapid and silences the thinkers. It stokes violence or indulgence depending on the desired effect, fostering either unity or sectarian strife as needed through television, websites, and social platforms. In this way, it injects millions of minds daily with calibrated signals that drown awareness in chaos, noise, and confusion, directing attention to trivialities while blinding it to existential truths. Meanwhile, schools, meant to be sanctuaries of free thought, have devolved into institutions of psychological conditioning rather than intellectual development. They have become machinery that strips science of its exploratory soul and reduces it to rote memorization, so that students do not learn how to think, but how to answer. They are not taught how to dissent, but how to obey. In this way, schools now resemble penal institutions that take in children innocent and unformed, only to extinguish their creative spirit and graduate them as compliant ignoramuses, molded to be led, not to lead. Alongside this educational degradation, entertainment has morphed into a weapon of collective idiocy. No longer intended for healthy psychological release, it now manipulates public mood, steers desires and beliefs through absurd dramas or thuggish spectacles, mindless dance content, prank shows, and scandalous programs. It functions as a tool of social sedation, feeding minds with intellectual voids and forcing laughter in place of meaningful dialogue, until the individual becomes nothing more than a passive spectator, watching themselves dissolve in a mirage of falsified images, distorted truths, inverted values, and mass-produced emotions. Thinking itself becomes a burden to be cast off, and society devolves into one that chases instant gratification while surrendering its capacity for reflection, criticism, and inquiry. People grow accustomed to the fast consumption of information and the subconscious ingestion of warped concepts about life, meaning, and value. Thus, media, education, and entertainment work in perfect synchrony toward a single aim: the weakening of public consciousness and the shaping of a fragile collective mind, programmed not to question, not to doubt, not to resist the false idols and counterfeit models it is commanded to revere. In every society, role models play a critical role in shaping behavior and aspirations. People, especially the youth, are deeply influenced by the figures spotlighted before them, adopting these figures as benchmarks for what is acceptable, desirable, or successful. And from this premise emerges one of the most insidious tools of manufactured ignorance: the creation of false idols, amplifying hollow, superficial figures while erasing those of genuine intellect and moral stature. The ruling elite actively promotes figures who are celebrated not for their intellect, integrity, or service to society, but for their appearance, media allure, fabricated controversies, or even scandals. Thus, the singer becomes a national icon, the footballer a hero, the fashion model an inspiration, the dancer an ideal mother, and the vacuous influencer a cultural symbol. Meanwhile, the thinker is sidelined, the preacher attacked, the sage silenced, the scientist mocked, and the revolutionary branded as mad or extremist. This inversion of role models fosters a generation that sees frivolity as intelligence, superficiality as maturity, and submission as awareness. It implants in young minds the belief that worth is not measured by knowledge or achievement, but by wealth, follower count, or the magnitude of one's media buzz. Social media platforms act as amplifiers of this grand deception, broadcasting trivial content and fruitless debates around the clock. They flood the digital sphere with illusory heroism, glittering facades, and counterfeit lifestyles that drive people into constant comparison, triggering feelings of inadequacy and a frenzied urge to imitate. Amid this race toward fabricated ideals, authentic values, moral principles, and even basic ethics and responsibility vanish, replaced by glossy slogans, performative spectacles, and lifestyles centered on appearance rather than substance. These false icons are not accidental figures who rise to fame by chance. They are meticulously crafted and strategically promoted by entities well aware that erasing authentic role models weakens identity, erodes aspirational ambition, and transforms society into a herd chasing counterfeit success, or more accurately, success and failure. This is a full-fledged industry aimed at engineering distorted consciousness and manufacturing a hollow human archetype, one that willingly drowns itself in shallowness as part of a calculated system of ignorance that begins in the soul and ends at the gates of absolute control. Control that no longer requires tanks or troops, only access to the keys of the collective mind through what is now known as social engineering. Social engineering is the art of reshaping individual and societal behavior in imperceptible ways, reprogramming minds through tools that appear harmless, entertaining, or even helpful. It is a cornerstone of the Systematic Ignorance Project, based on manipulating the human mind by first understanding it. With behavioral psychology, big data, and artificial intelligence, it is now possible to analyze cognitive patterns, identify perceptual weaknesses, and use them to steer decisions, shape opinions, and mold intellectual identities. This programming manifests in the algorithms that govern social media platforms. Everything you see, hear, or engage with is not random. It is served to you based on past behavior, or based on what those in control want you to believe next. In this way, algorithms create a cognitive bubble around each individual, immersing them in a custom-designed reality filled with what they like, reinforcing their beliefs, or rather, what the system wants them to believe. Moreover, subliminal messages and symbolic content are deployed to transmit toxic notions about life, success, identity, and faith, all without the recipient realizing they are being programmed and manipulated. It is now widely understood that advertisements, films, and even video games are not mere entertainment. They are potent platforms for weakening critical thought, reinforcing consumerist values, dismantling traditional social bonds, and flattening public awareness. All this is done without visible coercion, so that, in the end, the individual believes they are free, while in truth they are ensnared in an invisible system of control. Contrary to the popular belief that ignorance is a natural byproduct of poverty, resource scarcity, or educational deficiency, the truth is that ignorance is not a consequence. It is a calculated weapon, a silent, insidious tool of domination that renders violence unnecessary. An ignorant populace is easily governed and manipulated, not only politically, but economically, as passive consumers of a predatory capitalist system, culturally, as mouthpieces for regimes that exploit them, and even religiously, as blind followers of doctrines propagated by profiteers of faith. For the ignorant mind asks no questions, considers no alternatives, offers no resistance. It merely moves in the direction charted for it. In such a society, ignorance grants the ruling elite the power to pass unjust laws, impose exorbitant taxes, and seize national resources, all with minimal opposition. Simply put, the masses fail to grasp the reality of what transpires behind closed doors. They remain oblivious to the depth of the conspiracies woven against them. Worse still, ignorance may lead them to defend their oppressors and attack those who attempt to awaken them, an outcome both tragic and well documented in psychology as collective Stockholm Syndrome. In such cases, groups of people develop feelings of sympathy, loyalty, or even fierce allegiance toward the very systems or authorities that subjugate and harm them. This phenomenon is a broader manifestation of traditional Stockholm Syndrome, wherein a victim forms a positive emotional bond with their abuser. Ignorance is also weaponized to dismantle social structures and sow mistrust among different groups, thereby weakening any attempt to forge collective awareness or resistance. It fuels sectarian strife, ethnic fragmentation, and identity conflicts, keeping people busy with one another while diverting attention from their true oppressors. Ignorance, furthermore, creates the ideal soil for superstition and charlatanism to flourish. Prophets of the future multiply, and their predictions, though rarely fulfilled, are widely believed, serving the agenda of dominant forces. One need only look at the annual parade of televised fortune tellers whose forecasts seldom materialize, yet people continue to believe them year after year. Thus, ignorance morphs from a mere absence of knowledge into a fully functional system of control, a studied political condition that not only blinds people to the truth but instills in them fear of enlightenment. It convinces them to reject the light and remain in Plato's cave, imprisoned by those who rule over them. Yet perhaps the gravest consequence of mass ignorance is the dismantling of identity and the erasure of collective memory. People are made to forget their true history, their language, their culture, and even their sense of belonging, destroying the very foundations upon which any real renaissance might be built. A people unaware of their past, uncertain of who they are, becomes rootless and susceptible to any alternate narrative imposed upon them. This erasure of memory begins with education. Historical facts are distorted or framed in ways that diminish the heroes of the past, glorify traitors, exclude the golden chapters, and inflate failures, under deceptive banners like academic neutrality or historical objectivity. The true goal, however, is to rewrite history, sever the new generation from its heritage, and strip it of its pride and sense of belonging. Language, too, is a central battleground in this war. It is replaced with bastardized hybrids, while pride in one's native tongue is mocked. Cultures that equate fluency in a foreign language with sophistication are celebrated, leading to a collapse of linguistic sensitivity and disconnection from the original texts of one's heritage, history, and religion. One of the most poignant examples of this is what France did in Algeria, where Arabic was banned from schools and public life. Generations grew up unable to speak their mother tongue, a language that came close to extinction, were it not for the valiant few who endured hardship to preserve it against erasure and cultural colonization. Today's tools of modernity now advance the mission. Films, dramas, and songs promote a human model severed from its roots, ignorant of its history, devoid of purpose beyond consumption and fleeting pleasures, and clinging to a synthetic, prefabricated identity. In this setting, individuals lose the ability to connect the present with the past. They lack the tools of historical analysis, the collective memory required to resist the cyclical repetition of old plots. The collective unconscious is emptied, rendered fragile, and ready to be reprogrammed with any narrative that serves the ruling elite. Thus, the dismantling of identity is not a mere byproduct of modernization. It is a strategic weapon used to strip societies of their capacity for comprehension. When the past is erased, the present loses its meaning, and the future its direction. What's more, ignorance has evolved beyond the mere concealment of facts, the distortion of history, or the manipulation of education and media. It has become an ideology of its own, one that drowns populations in frivolity, distracts them from existential concerns, and persuades them that superficiality is a lifestyle and that ignorance is not a flaw, but a fashionable trait. This is not a spontaneous descent, but a deliberate strategy designed to preoccupy minds with a meaningless, draining life of any moral, intellectual, or spiritual dimension. We witness with our own eyes how the media celebrates celebrity scandals, promotes figures crafted to stir controversy rather than thought, and how digital platforms are flooded with trivial clips that garner millions of views while vital issues are marginalized and serious discourse is ridiculed. Thus, life under the reign of superficiality becomes a farcical theater in which people compete for fame rather than substance, for attention rather than impact, and for self-promotion rather than service to society. The entire value system is restructured so that the shallow rise to the top, while those of principle, intellect, and purpose fade into the shadows. Yet it is crucial to understand that triviality resides not only in content but in the very way of thinking. It has become the zeitgeist of the age, carefully engineered to discourage questioning, mock contemplation, and scorn any attempt at genuine change. This ideology is fueled by advertisements preaching momentary living, music recycling the same beats and phrases, dramas reproducing the same characters, and video games injecting violence and materialism into the minds of children and adolescents. The result: a society that laughs constantly, yet no longer knows why, that follows everything, yet understands nothing, that consumes endlessly, yet produces nothing of value. It is a society of programmed ignorance and manufactured silliness, kept shallow and easily tamed, busied with the void. And no project of mass ignorance is complete without focusing on the programming of children, for they are the future, the most potent and vulnerable demographic. The operation begins early, ensuring that the child grows up intellectually weak, emotionally fragile, stripped of belonging, and primed to accept whatever is imposed upon them without resistance. This targeting is not done through coercion or overt force, but in charming, entertaining guises, via children's programs, educational content, gaming platforms, and social media. Values, ideas, and worldviews are planted not through sermons or textbooks, but through stories, cartoons, and songs. This is where the danger lies. Animated shows have become powerful tools for dismantling religious values, redefining concepts of good and evil, justice, identity, even family and gender. They smuggle subversive messages beneath banners of tolerance and diversity, subtly introducing confused notions about selfhood, authority, faith, and belonging, leading children to question their foundational references and gravitate toward foreign models that do not reflect their own civilization. Video games, meanwhile, have long transcended mere entertainment. They are now platforms for instilling aggression, eroding concentration, and blurring the line between reality and fantasy. With instant interactivity and emotional immersion, they create addictive environments that imprison children behind screens, isolating them from their surroundings and rendering them susceptible to unconscious programming. Returning to the field of education, we find curricula drained of vitality, designed to prevent students from thinking beyond prescribed frameworks. In some countries, textbooks are infused with political or social messages that mold students into alignment with values alien to their own cultures, leaving them ashamed of their history, language, or religion. On social media, adolescents are bombarded with an endless stream of senseless challenges, artificial trends, and digital celebrities who propagate a superficial image of success, convincing the youth that a person's worth is measured by likes and followers, not by knowledge, ethics, or responsibility. In this way, the system need not suppress the new generation. It merely reshapes them from an early age to ensure that, by the time they come of age, they are unfit for critical thought or meaningful resistance. Yet, while liberation from this imposed bondage, this flood of engineered ignorance, triviality, and early mental colonization may seem daunting, it is not beyond reach. Because knowledge is always the starting point of true emancipation, and awareness is not simply the accumulation of information, but an act of defiance and the ability to decode hidden messages and perceive what lies beneath the surface. The free mind is not easily deceived. It does not wander blindly through the maze of misinformation. Instead, it seeks the source, examines the narratives, compares the accounts, and rebuilds its understanding of the world with clarity and truth. To build such awareness, we must first proclaim the value of reading and self-education, far from hollow curricula and manipulative digital content. We must revive true history by recounting the lives of real heroes and drawing connections between past and present, so the new generation understands that it is the heir to a great civilization, not a detached being adrift in a fleeting consumerist world. They must be raised to think critically, not to memorize mechanically, to expose and reject triviality as content, behavior, and lifestyle, and to boycott the false idols imposed upon them by screens as role models. Equally vital is the restoration of the mother tongue and pride in it, for language is the bearer of identity, the bridge to our thought, our history, and our faith. The real battle against the machinery of ignorance is not fought through facts alone, but through the method of engaging with those facts, with a deep understanding that ignorance is a web of false concepts carefully planted in the mind, repeated until they harden into unquestioned truths, shaping our worldview, dictating what we love and loathe, what we accept and what we reject. Even so, no force can succeed in stupefying a people who have realized the value of their minds, reclaimed their language, reconnected their past to their present, and refused to be mere numbers in a system. A people who lead a revolution of consciousness that restores their dignity and their power to think freely, beyond the shackles of engineered ignorance. But such a revolution will only come through awakening, through reinterpreting the world around us and nurturing a healthy skepticism toward all that is served as unquestionable dogma. For when minds awaken, they unsettle the machinery of control with a light that resists obfuscation and a voice that pierces the veils of deceit. And so, no matter how long the night of ignorance may last, the dawn of awareness is inevitable, unshaken by fear, undelayed by chains. It is coming, inevitably.